Commander Cale Vance's boots clinked against the metal floor of Kepler 186 F outpost, docking bay, as he performed his routine patrol. The former military man couldn't help but stifle a yawn. 3 years of desk duty had dulled his edge, and the tedium of paperwork had been slowly suffocating him. At least today he was on patrol duty, a small mercy. "Commander, I detect elevated biological signatures from Base 7, said a cool, melodic voice beside him. Cale glanced at his new partner, Officer Lyra Thani. The Xylosian's azure skin seemed to shimmer under the harsh industrial lighting, her large, almond-shaped eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with inhuman precision. They'd been partnered for only 2 weeks, and their styles couldn't be more different. Where Cale relied on gut instinct and sometimes bent the rules, Lyra was meticulous, logical, and followed protocol to the letter. Base 7? That's the Starbreeze, right? Carrying machine parts. Cale frowned, pulling up the manifest on his datapad. Correct. The ship is registered to a Captain Slith, transporting mechanical components to the Rigel system, Lyra confirmed, her slender fingers moving over her own device. However, I'm detecting organic energy patterns inconsistent with the manifest. Cale nodded. Despite their differences, he respected Lyra's abilities. Xylosians had enhanced senses that could detect biological and energy signatures at a level no human tech could match. "Let's check it out," he said, changing direction. The Starbreeze was an older model cargo vessel, weathered and patched in places. As they approached, a reptilian figure emerged from the cargo bay. Captain Slith, a draconian with mottled green scales and a nervous twitch in his tail. "Officers, what a pleasant surprise," Slith exclaimed, displaying too many teeth in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Just finished unloading some parts. Everything's in order, I assure you." "Standard inspection, Captain," Cale said casually, noting how Slith's yellow eyes darted between them. "Mind if we take a look inside?" Of course, Slith agreed too quickly. "Although I'm on a tight schedule. Perhaps we could expedite this." He reached into his vest pocket, and Cale tensed, but Slith merely produced a small credit chip, holding it out discreetly. "That won't be necessary," Lyra stated firmly, her antenna twitching slightly, a sign of disapproval Cale had come to recognize. They boarded the ship, and Slith hovered uncomfortably close as they began their inspection. The main cargo hold was indeed filled with machine parts, all properly documented. "Everything is as declared," Slith insisted, his tail flicking with increasing agitation. "Now, if you're satisfied—" "Actually," Cale interrupted, having noticed a discrepancy in the ship's layout, "I'd like to check this section here." He pointed to a wall that, according to the ship's schematics, shouldn't be there. "Storage," Slith said dismissively. "Nothing but supplies for the journey." "Commander," Lyra called softly from where she stood. Her antennae were fully extended, vibrating subtly. "Life signs. Multiple. Small." That was all Cale needed to hear. "Open it, Captain. Now." Slith's demeanor changed instantly. "You're overstepping your authority, human. I have friends in." Cale drew his stunner. "Open the door, or I'll charge you with obstruction and bring in a full ISEF team to tear this ship apart bolt by bolt." With a hiss of defeat, Slith reluctantly entered a code on a concealed panel. The false wall slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. The stench hit them first, unwashed bodies, fear, and despair. Then came the soft whimpers and rustles. In the dim light of the compartment, for small figures huddled in makeshift cages. Cale felt his blood run cold, then hot with fury. Children, for alien children of different species, crammed into spaces barely large enough to contain them. One had delicate purple feathers, matted and dull. 2 appeared to be twins with softly glowing skin that pulsed with their frightened heartbeats. The 4th was a small plant-like child, tendrils drooping and leaves wilted. Lyra inhaled sharply beside him, her professional composure cracking for a moment as she took in the scene. Then, with remarkable control, she tapped her communicator. "ISF Officers Thani to Central Command. We have a code red at Docking Bay 7. Child trafficking in progress. requesting immediate backup and medical assistance. Cale barely heard her. His focus had narrowed to Slith, who was slowly backing toward the exit. With 3 quick strides, Cale crossed the distance between them and slammed the captain against the bulkhead. "You piece of," Cale growled, pressing his forearm against the reptilian's throat. "Commander!" Lyra's sharp voice cut through his rage. "We need him alive and talking." Cale released his grip slightly, but kept Slith pinned. "Who are you working for? Where were you taking them?" Slith's forked tongue flicked nervously. "Just a delivery man. I don't ask questions." "Well, you'd better start answering them," Cale snarled. Suddenly, Slith's tail whipped around, catching Cale behind the knees. The commander stumbled, and Slith made a break for it. He didn't get far. A flash of blue light erupted from Lyra's direction, and Slith collapsed, paralyzed by her neural disruptor. Lyra calmly holstered her weapon. Xylosian reflexes, she explained with the faintest hint of satisfaction. Then her expression softened as she looked toward the cages. "The children are our priority now." The next hour was a blur of activity. Medical personnel arrived, led by Dr. Eris Thorne, a gentle Forian with 4 arms that moved with remarkable precision as he examined each child. Malnourished, dehydrated, Dr. Thorne reported, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with concern as he scanned the purple-feathered child. And signs of sedative use, but no life-threatening injuries. The twins clung to each other, their skin glow fluctuating wildly. The plant child had curled its tendrils protectively around itself. The feathered one simply stared, eyes vacant with trauma. "Do any of them speak standard?" Cale asked, keeping his voice low and gentle. Dr. Thorne shook his head. "Not fluently. The Floralite, the plant child, knows some basic phrases. The Lamidian twins seem to communicate mostly with each other through their bioluminescence. The avialien appears to understand, but won't speak." Lyra approached the children, kneeling at a non-threatening distance. She spoke in a series of musical tones Cale had never heard before. The feathered child's head snapped up, eyes focusing for the first time. "You know their language?" Cale asked, impressed. "Not exactly," Lyra replied. "But Xylosians study universal harmonic patterns that form the basis of many languages. It can sometimes bridge communication gaps." The feathered child chittered something in response. "His name is Leary," Lyra translated. "He was taken from his homeworld during a festival. He doesn't know how long ago." Cale felt his chest tighten. With gentle coaxing and Lyra's linguistic abilities, they learned bits and pieces from the others. The twins, Mira and Tala, had been separated from their clan during a migration. The plant child, who called itself Seedling, had been taken from a botanical sanctuary. As Dr. Thorne prepared the children for transfer to the medical bay, he frowned, examining the back of Leary's neck. "Commander, Officers Thani, you should see this." He pointed to a small, precise scar at the base of the child's skull, partially hidden by feathers. All 4 children have identical marks. Surgical incisions, recently healed. Implants. Cale guessed grimly. "Yes, but removed. Or possibly malfunctioning," Dr. Thorne confirmed. "I'll need to run more tests." They escorted the children to the medical bay, where they were given warm blankets, food, and water. Slith was taken to a holding cell, still paralyzed and awaiting interrogation. "Vance, Thani, my office now." The booming voice of Commander Rorik echoed across the medical bay. Rorik was a bull of a man, with a perpetually flushed face and a bureaucrat's love for procedures and appearances. In his office, Rorik paced behind his desk, tension radiating from him. "Do you have any idea of the diplomatic nightmare you've created? The Draconian embassy is already demanding Slith's release, claiming harassment. He was transporting children in cages," Cale said incredulously. "Alleged trafficking," Rorik corrected. "Nothing proven yet. And even if it is, it's now an issue for Alliance Central, not our local jurisdiction. We're transferring the children to the Alliance Care Facility on Proxima Station tomorrow." Cale exchanged a glance with Lyra. They both knew what that meant. The ACF was notorious for its bureaucratic inefficiency and poor conditions. Children went in and were often forgotten, lost in paperwork or reallocated to dubious labor programs. "Sir," Lyra began, "with respect, the children require specialized care and are potential witnesses. Moving them so soon could be detrimental to their recovery and our investigation." "The decision is made," Rourke said flatly. "This outpost isn't equipped for long-term juvenile care, and I won't have the budget for it." "Dismissed." Outside Rourke's office, Cale punched the wall in frustration, then winced as pain shot through his hand. "That was unproductive," Lyra observed. "Something's not right," Cale muttered. "Rourke's always been a stickler for rules, but this is different. It's like he wants this whole thing to disappear." Lyra's antennae twitched in agreement. "I've noticed discrepancies as well. The Draconian Embassy's rapid response is statistically unusual, and Rourke's concern about budgetary issues is invalid. Alliance emergency protocols provide full funding for trafficking victims." Cale looked at his partner with newfound appreciation. "You know, for someone who follows every regulation to the letter, you're surprisingly good at spotting when something's fishy." "I follow regulations because they typically maximize optimal outcomes," Lyra replied. "But logic dictates that when a system is compromised, following its rules may be counterproductive." A slow smile spread across Cale's face. "Officer Stanny, are you suggesting we bend the rules?" "I'm suggesting we investigate further before allowing potentially compromised protocols to endanger vulnerable children," she clarified, but there was a new glint in her large eyes. They split up to pursue different angles. Lyra used her analytical skills to trace the Starbreeze's flight patterns and transactions, while Cale reached out to contacts in Kepler's shadier establishments. They reconvened in a quiet corner of the station's mostly empty botanical garden, away from surveillance. "The Starbreeze made 3 stops before here that weren't in its official logs," Lyra reported. "Each near habitation zones with reported missing children cases." Cale nodded grimly. "My old contacts say there's a high-end market for exotic acquisitions. Some collectors want rare species as pets or curiosities. Others have darker purposes. Some species have biological compounds that fetch high prices." "And the implants?" Lyra asked. "Control devices, most likely. Tracking, behavior modification." My source wasn't sure. A slight furrow appeared between Lyra's antennae, her version of a frown. "This suggests an organized operation with significant resources, not merely an opportunistic smuggler. Which means Slith is just a small fish, and the real players might have influence even here on the station." They both fell silent, reaching the same conclusion simultaneously. "The children aren't safe in the medical bay," Lyra stated. "And we can't trust the official channels," Cale added, "especially if someone connected has eyes on Rourke." Their unspoken plan was interrupted by Lyra's communicator buzzing. It was Dr. Thorne. "Officers, you need to return immediately," the doctor said, his usually calm voice tense. "There's been an incident with the AV alien child's life support." They rushed back to find security personnel and medical staff crowded around Leary's bed. The young AV alien was unconscious but stable, with Dr. Thorne monitoring his vitals. "What happened?" Cale demanded. "His respiratory support unit was tampered with," Dr. Thorne explained, his bioluminescent patches flashing with agitation. "The oxygen mixture was altered to include a paralytic agent. If I hadn't noticed the flow indicator's abnormal reading." "Security footage?" Lyra asked. A security officer shook his head. "System glitched for approximately 6 minutes. Nothing recorded." "That's no glitch," Cale muttered. Lyra was already examining the respiratory unit. This required specialized knowledge. The override codes are ISF grade. Cale felt cold dread settling in his stomach. Someone inside their own organization had tried to silence Leary, or take him. "We move them. Tonight," he whispered to Lyra when they had a moment alone. She nodded once, decisively. "I already have a secure location in mind." Hours later, after careful planning with Dr. Thorne's covert help, they were ready. The doctor had officially sedated the children for necessary medical procedures, giving them time to act. Cale created a diversion by triggering a minor security alert in the cargo section. While attention was diverted, Lyra used her access codes to temporarily disable the surveillance system in the medical bay's corridor, a trick that would look like a system update rather than tampering. One by one, they moved the children, wrapped in thermal blankets that would mask their biological signatures from casual scans, through service corridors to a rarely used maintenance shuttle. Dr. Thorne provided essential medical supplies and promised to join them at the safe location once his shift ended. Their destination was an abandoned observation module on the outer ring of the station, officially decommissioned due to radiation concerns, but actually perfectly safe. Lyra had discovered the discrepancy in the station records during an earlier assignment and kept the knowledge to herself, finding the quiet location useful for meditation. "This is technically stealing ISF property," Kale remarked as they settled the still drowsy children into makeshift beds constructed from emergency supplies. "Technically, it's unauthorized allocation of resources for a sanctioned protection operation," Lyra corrected, setting up a small field generator that would further mask their presence. Kale laughed quietly. "You always find the perfect regulation to justify breaking the rules. I prefer to think of it as applying the spirit of the law when the letter has been compromised," she replied, but there was a hint of a smile in her voice. As the night's cycle progressed, the children began to wake. Initially frightened by the unfamiliar surroundings, they calmed when they saw Kale and Lyra. Seedling even extended a tendril toward Lyra's hand in what seemed to be a gesture of trust. Using a combination of simple standard phrases, Lyra's harmonic communication, and improvised sign language, they explained to the children that they were in a safe place, hidden from bad people. "We'll protect you," Kale promised, awkwardly patting Myra's glowing shoulder when she huddled against him, shivering not from cold but from fear. Leary, still weak from the attempt on his life, watched Kale with intelligent eyes. He chirped something to Lyra. "He says you have kind eyes, for a human," Lyra translated. "He's met humans before. They were the ones who put the metal thing in his head." "What did it do?" Kale asked gently. Leary touched the scar on his neck and made a pained expression, then pointed to his eyes and made circular motions with his finger. "I believe he's saying it showed him things." "Visions or images," Lyra interpreted. "Mind control?" Kale asked, horrified. "Perhaps training or conditioning," Lyra suggested. If the children were being prepared for specific buyers with specific requirements, they didn't need to finish the thought. The implications were clear and disturbing. With the children finally settled into sleep, Kale and Lyra huddled near the observation window, the vast starscape providing a peaceful backdrop to their grim planning session. "We need to find where these kids came from and who's behind this," Kale said. "Slith is not talking, but the ship might have navigation records we missed." "I've analyzed the data we have," Lyra replied. "There's a recurring coordinate sequence in the ship's secondary navigation system, possibly deleted, but not fully purged from the backup cache. It points to an asteroid in the outer mining belt. Records show it as an abandoned excavation site, now registered as a salvage yard. Perfect cover for a trafficking operation," Kale nodded. "Remote, legitimate reason for ships to come and go, unlikely to attract attention." "We should investigate," Lyra stated. "We?" Kale raised an eyebrow. "Lyra, this is already way beyond regulations. I was planning to go alone. If things go bad, at least one of us needs to be here for the kids." Lyra's antennae stiffened, a sign of determination Kale had come to recognize. Statistical analysis indicates a 73% higher success rate for teams versus solo operations in hostile territory. Additionally, my sensory capabilities will provide advantages that you lack. It is logical that we proceed together." Kale wanted to argue, but knew she was right. "What about the children?" "Dr. Thorne will arrive in approximately 4 hours. We can depart then." Their planning was interrupted by a small sound. They turned to find Leary standing there. Feathers puffed in what Kale had learned was an expression of anxiety. The avialien child pointed to himself, then to them, then made a motion like a ship flying. "He wants to come with us," Lyra translated, though the meaning was clear. Kale knelt down to Leary's level. "No, buddy. Too dangerous. You stay here with Dr. Thorne and the others. We'll come back, I promise." Leary shook his head vigorously. He pointed to the back of his neck, then made a shape with his hands that resembled the asteroid in Lyra's data visualization. He's been there, Lyra realized, where the implant was placed. Leary nodded emphatically. He could guide us, Cale mused, but still too risky. Lyra considered the child thoughtfully. Perhaps not physically, but his knowledge could be valuable. We should try to learn what he knows before we depart. For the next hour, they worked with Leary, using drawings and improvised communication to gather what information they could. The picture that emerged was disturbing. A facility built inside the asteroid, children brought in groups, the surgical procedures, some kind of training or conditioning using the implants, and then separation into different areas based on criteria they couldn't quite determine. Some kind of sorting or classification system, Lyra suggested as she studied the crude map Leary had drawn, perhaps based on species-specific traits or buyer requirements. By the time Dr. Thorne arrived, they had a rough plan. The doctor was horrified by the assassination attempt, but not entirely surprised. Be careful, he warned as he checked the medical supplies in their field packs. Whoever is behind this has resources and reach. These neural implants are advanced technology, not something a common smuggler would have access to. They borrowed a small maintenance vessel with a mass transponder, another creative allocation of resources that Lyra justified with impressive regulatory gymnastics. The journey to the asteroid would take 8 hours, during which they prepared as best they could with limited equipment. You know, Cale said as they sat in the cramped cockpit, watching the stars stream by, a month ago, I would never have believed I'd be on a rogue mission with the most by-the-book Xylosian in the ISF. Lyra's antennae twitched in what Cale now recognized as amusement. And I would not have anticipated partnering with a human who initially struck me as undisciplined and excessively emotional. Initially, Cale grinned. So I've grown on you? Like a properly cultivated symbiotic organism, she replied dryly, but there was warmth in her voice that hadn't been there when they first met. As they approached the asteroid, they killed all non-essential systems to minimize their energy signature. The massive rock loomed before them, pockmarked with old mining shafts and scattered with what appeared to be junked ships and equipment. No obvious external defenses, Cale observed through the view screen. But that doesn't mean they're not there. Lyra's eyes were unfocused as she extended her sensory awareness. Multiple life signs within the central section. Various species. Security systems are present, but unusual. They appear focused inward rather than outward. Keeping things in, not out, Cale translated grimly. Confirms this is a holding facility. They identified a disused mining entrance partly obscured by a derelict hauler and navigated carefully inside, landing in what appeared to be an abandoned equipment bay. The air was thin but breathable, with the metallic taste common to asteroid facilities. Moving silently, they made their way deeper. Lyra led, her superior senses alerting them to surveillance systems they needed to avoid. Cale followed, stunner ready, watching their backs. Years of military training kept his movements fluid and quiet despite the tension knotting his shoulders. The facility grew more sophisticated as they progressed. Rough-hewn tunnels gave way to properly constructed corridors with functioning lighting and life support. They passed storage areas containing supplies and equipment, some standard, some disturbing in their medical precision. Multiple biosignatures ahead, Lyra whispered, antennae vibrating. Smaller than adult norms. Consistent with juvenile patterns. They found their first holding area behind a security door that Lyra managed to override using techniques she claimed were theoretically covered under emergency response protocols. Inside were 8 small containment units, each housing a child of a different species. All bore the same surgical scar at the base of the skull. Stars above, Cale breathed, taking in the silent, listless children. Some looked up as they entered, eyes dull with resignation rather than hope. Lyra moved to a control panel and quickly scanned the data. These are designated as Training Group C. There are at least 2 other groups elsewhere in the facility. Can we get them out? Not yet. The containment units are biometrically tuned to each occupant. Improper deactivation could trigger alarms or worse. They continued on, documenting everything with their comm units. The next area they discovered made bile rise in Kale's throat, a surgical suite with equipment specifically designed for neural implantation. These are military-grade, Lyra noted, examining the devices. Designed for battlefield enhancement of special forces. How did such technology reach criminal elements? The black market for military tech has exploded since the frontier wars, Kale replied grimly. But this level of sophistication suggests someone with direct access, not just a fence dealing in stolen goods. Before they could investigate further, Lyra froze, antennae rigid. Guards approaching. 2. Armed. They ducked into a supply closet seconds before 2 humanoid figures in unmarked security uniforms passed by, discussing shift rotations with bored familiarity. Told Vantech, I'm not doing double shifts anymore, implant maintenance or not. Better than transport duty. Last shipment had a crystalline that nearly shattered my eardrum with its distress harmonics. Their voices faded as they continued down the corridor. Vantech, Kale whispered. A name. And it sounds like they're in charge of the implants. They made their way toward the central control hub, following the facility's power conduits. Along the way, they discovered more holding areas, a training room with virtual reality equipment, and most disturbingly, display chambers where children were showcased behind transparent barriers, like products in a store. The control center was their biggest risk yet, a large room with multiple stations and 3 staff members. After observing for several minutes, they identified the duty patterns and waited for the optimal moment when 2 of the staff left for a systems check, leaving only 1 operator. Kale moved swiftly, immobilizing the surprised technician with a precision stun before he could trigger any alarms. Lyra immediately accessed the main system. Downloading all data, she confirmed as her fingers flew across the interface. Commander, you should see this. On the main screen was a customer database, prominent names from across the Alliance territories, including politicians, wealthy industrialists, and even a few military officials. Beside each name were preference specifications and previous acquisition records. This is bigger than we imagined, Kale said, feeling sick. These aren't just random criminals. This is systematic trafficking supported by people in power, including individuals on Kepler 186F, Lyra confirmed, highlighting several entries. One name stood out immediately. Syndicate Director Morton Vantech, listed as the operation's founder and primary investor. His base of operations, Kepler 186F Outpost Administration. That explains Rourke's behavior, Kale growled. Vantech must have him in his pocket. More concerning is this, Lyra said, bringing up another file. Shipment schedules. There's a major transport arriving in 18 standard hours with new merchandise, and outgoing deliveries scheduled immediately after to various buyers. Kale, check the time. We need to get this data to someone we can trust and come back with a proper strike force before that shipment arrives. A blaring alarm cut through the air, red emergency lights flashing throughout the facility. Perimeter breach detected, an automated voice announced. Security protocols activated. They've discovered our ship, Lyra said, hastily completing the data transfer to her secure comm unit. We need to leave now. They barely made it out of the control room before security forces began converging on their location. Armed guards cut off their planned escape route, forcing them to dive down a maintenance shaft that, according to the facility schematics Lyra had downloaded, should lead toward the outer sections. What followed was a chaotic running battle through the asteroid's corridors. Kale's military training proved invaluable as they used the narrow passageways to funnel their pursuers into ambush points. Lyra demonstrated surprising combat skills, her Xylosian reflexes allowing her to incapacitate opponents with precise nerve strikes. Since when does a by-the-book officer fight like that? Kale gasped as they took momentary cover behind a power junction. Xylosian diplomatic security core training, she replied calmly, though her breathing was accelerated. Standard for officers assigned to cross-species missions. They fought their way toward the holding areas, knowing they couldn't leave the children behind now that their cover was blown. In the chaos of the security response, they managed to override the first containment section, freeing the 8 children they had discovered earlier. "We need to find the others," Kale insisted, helping a small reptilian child to its feet. "No time," Lyra countered. "Additional security forces are converging from the central hub. Our priority must be escaping with the evidence and these children. We can return with proper forces for the others." It was the hardest decision Kale had ever made, but he knew she was right. They herded the frightened children toward an emergency evacuation route that Lyra had identified in the facility schematics, a seldom-used pressure tunnel that led to a secondary maintenance dock. They reached the dock just as the facility's backup security systems activated, sealing bulkheads behind them. Their ship was lost to them now, trapped in the compromised main dock, but the maintenance bay contained several small shuttles used for external repairs. "Can you fly one of these?" Kale asked as he helped the children into the largest shuttle. "Theoretically," Lyra replied, already working on the launch sequence. "The principles are similar to standard ISF craft." "Theoretically is good enough for me right now," Kale said, stunner raised as the sound of approaching guards echoed down the corridor. The shuttle's engines sputtered to life just as the first guards appeared at the dock entrance. Kale laid down, covering fire, backing slowly toward the shuttle ramp as Lyra prepared for emergency departure. One of the guards got off a lucky shot, catching Kale in the shoulder. He stumbled, but managed to make it into the shuttle, hitting the ramp control as he fell. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Lyra's concerned face and the asteroid facility receding rapidly through the view screen. When Kale woke, he was lying on a makeshift bed in an unfamiliar room. His shoulder was bandaged, and the dull throb told him he'd been given painkillers. Turning his head, he saw Lyra seated nearby, monitoring both him and a communications array jury-rigged from the shuttle systems. "Welcome back, Commander," she said, moving to his side. "Your injury is significant, but not life-threatening. I've administered appropriate medical treatment." "The kids?" he asked, voice rough. "All present and physically stable. Dr. Thorne has been informed of our situation and is arranging transport to our location." Kale tried to sit up and winced. "Where exactly is our location?" "An abandoned listening post on Kepler, 186F's third moon. It was decommissioned after the border realignment 5 years ago, but still has basic life support functioning." "How long was I out?" "Approximately 7 hours. I've used the time to analyze the data we recovered and establish secure communication protocols." Despite the pain, Kale smiled. "Always efficient." Something softened in Lyra's expression. "I was concerned when you were hit. Your biological readings were erratic." "Worried about me, Officers Thani?" he teased. Her antennae twitched in what might have been embarrassment. "It would be inefficient to lose a partner after investing in our working relationship," she stated, but her hand briefly touched his in a gesture that felt decidedly non-professional. The moment was interrupted by one of the rescued children, a small, insect-like being, approaching tentatively. It held out what appeared to be a cup of water toward Kale. "Thank you," Kale said gently, accepting the offering. Lyra explained, "They've been taking turns watching over you. I believe they understand you were injured protecting them." Over the next day, as Kale recovered enough to move around, they prepared for their next steps. The data they'd recovered was damning. Detailed records of hundreds of children processed through the facility, buyers, transportation routes, and financial transactions. "We need to get this to someone high enough in the Alliance hierarchy to act on it without being compromised," Kale said as they reviewed the files. "I have a contact," Lyra revealed. "Admiral Tlar of the 7th Fleet. She was my mentor at the Academy and has an unimpeachable record for integrity. Can we trust her secure channels won't be monitored?" "The Admiral maintains independent communication protocols specifically to counter potential internal corruption," Lyra assured him. "It is how she exposed the Orion supply scandal 3 years ago." Dr. Thorne arrived with supplies and additional medical equipment for the children. The gentle Forian had risked his career by helping them, yet showed no hesitation when treating the traumatized youngsters. "Rorik is claiming you've both gone rogue," he informed them as he examined Kale's wound. "There's an ISF alert for your detention. The official story is that you assaulted staff and kidnapped the children for unknown purposes." "And the ones we rescued from the asteroid?" Kale asked. Dr. Thorne's bioluminescent patches dimmed with concern. "No mention of them at all. It's as if they don't exist. They transmitted their evidence to Admiral Tlar through Lyra's secure channel, along with a full report of everything they'd witnessed. Now all they could do was wait and hope the Admiral would act swiftly. The hours of waiting created an unexpected opportunity. Away from danger, with their basic needs met, the children began to open up. Using a combination of Lyra's linguistic abilities, visual aids, and simple games, they learned more about each child's story. Among the newly rescued 8 was a crystalline being named Prism, whose song-like communication had gradually become more comfortable around them. There were twin reptilians barely old enough to walk, who had been taken from a border colony. Others came from worlds Kale had never even heard of. Most heartbreaking was their attachment to Kale and Lyra, the first adults in months or years who had shown them kindness. The children followed them everywhere, helped with tasks, and, at night, insisted on sleeping close by. "They see us as their protectors now," Lyra observed softly one evening as they watched the children finally sleeping peacefully. "What happens to them when this is over?" Kale asked, the question hanging heavily between them. "Some have homes to return to, but others." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her antennae drooping slightly in what Kale now recognized as her expression of deep thought. "The Alliance protocols for displaced juvenile refugees are inadequate. They would be processed through the system, likely separated and placed in species-appropriate facilities." "Separated," Kale repeated, watching how Mira and Tala curled protectively around each other, even in sleep. "That would destroy them. They've formed bonds with each other. After everything they've been through, tearing them apart would be another trauma." "I have been considering alternatives," Lyra admitted, "though they are unconventional." Before she could elaborate, their secure comm pinged with an incoming transmission. Admiral Tlares' stern face appeared on the screen, her silver-scaled features set in grim determination. "Officers Thani, Commander Vance, I've reviewed your evidence and find it both credible and deeply disturbing. A fleet security detachment is already en route to the asteroid facility, and I've initiated Level 1 surveillance protocols on all individuals named in the files, including your Commander Rorik." "Thank you, Admiral," Lyra said with evident relief. "Don't thank me yet," Tlar cautioned. "This reaches into levels of the Alliance I cannot openly challenge without irrefutable proof. The files you sent contain enough to start operations, but electronic evidence can be contested or claimed as fabricated. We need physical evidence and testimony." "The children," Kale realized, "and the implant technology." "Precisely. I need you both, with all rescued children and any physical evidence you've secured, at these coordinates in 26 hours. The Admiral transmitted a location deep in the Kepler system's asteroid belt. My personal vessel will rendezvous with you there. Until then, maintain complete communication silence. Vantech has resources within communication networks that even I cannot fully counteract." After the Admiral signed off, Kale and Lyra prepared for their final journey. Dr. Thorne reluctantly returned to the station to avoid suspicion, promising to gradually remove or corrupt any medical records that could be used to track the children. The journey to the rendezvous point was tense. Their shuttle, though serviceable, wasn't designed for this many passengers or deep space travel. Life support systems strained under the load, and they had to carefully ration supplies. During the final hours of their approach, proximity alarms blared. 3 pursuit vessels were closing fast, unmarked but with the acceleration signature of military-grade engines. "Vantech must have tracked us somehow," Kale said, sliding into the pilot's seat despite his injured shoulder. "Lyra, get the kid secured. This is going to get rough." What followed was a desperate chase through the asteroid belt. Kale pushed the maintenance shuttle beyond its specifications, using the dense field of space rocks as cover while Lyra monitored systems and kept the increasingly frightened children calm. "We cannot outrun them indefinitely," Lyra stated as warning lights flashed across the control panel. "Engine stress is reaching critical levels." A shot from the lead pursuit vessel grazed their port side, sending the shuttle into a dangerous spin. Kale fought the controls, stabilizing just in time to avoid collision with a massive asteroid. "We need a plan B," he grunted, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort and pain. Lyra's antennae suddenly straightened. "Commander, I'm detecting a new vessel approaching. Alliance Navy designation." A powerful warship dropped out of FTL directly in their path, its imposing silhouette instantly recognizable as an Alliance Defender-class cruiser. Admiral Tlares' flagship. The pursuit vessels scattered immediately, but the cruiser's tractor beam locked onto two of them before they could escape. The third vanished back into the asteroid field. "Shuttle Horizon, this is ANV Steadfast," came the official hail. "You are cleared for emergency docking in Bay 3. The relief that flooded through Kale as they guided their battered shuttle into the massive docking bay was overwhelming. When the airlock cycled open, a full medical team was waiting, along with Admiral Tlar herself, a striking figure with silver-scaled skin and the characteristic ridge crest of her species. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice as firm and authoritative in person as it had been over the comm. "Let's get these children to the medical bay." The next few hours were a whirlwind of debriefings, medical examinations, and evidence processing. The children were treated with remarkable sensitivity by the cruiser's specialized xenobiological team, while Kale and Lyra provided exhaustive statements about everything they had discovered. The raid on the asteroid facility was successful, Admiral Tlar informed them later in her private briefing room. "We secured 27 more children and arrested 15 operatives, including the facility's director. Unfortunately, it appears Vantek himself was warned somehow and fled Kepler, 186F outpost hours before we arrived." "What about Rorik?" Kale asked. "In custody, along with 3 other station officials implicated in the operation. He's already attempting to negotiate leniency in exchange for information." The Admiral's expression hardened. "He won't find me receptive to such offers." "And the children?" Lyra asked, the question that had been weighing on both their minds. Admiral Tlares' stern demeanor softened slightly. "That presents a more complex challenge. Many have no identifiable homes to return to. Even those who do will require extensive psychological support and rehabilitation. They can't go into the standard alliance system," Kale insisted. "Not after what they've been through." The Admiral studied them both carefully. "I've reviewed your service records during our approach. Commander Vance, despite your occasional disregard for protocol, you have an exemplary history of ethical judgment. And Officers Thani, your analytical capabilities are matched only by your dedication to justice rather than mere rule-following." She leaned forward. "I have a proposition for you both. One that would require significant personal commitment, but might provide the best solution for these children." The Admiral's plan was bold. Establish a specialized rehabilitation and care center specifically for victims of trafficking and exploitation. It would operate under fleet protection protocols, bypassing the bureaucratic alliance welfare system entirely. Most importantly, it would keep the children together in an environment designed for their unique needs. "You want us to run it," Kale realized, glancing at Lyra. "You've already earned these children's trust," Admiral Tlar pointed out. "And you've demonstrated both the commitment and capabilities required. I can arrange the necessary resources and political coverage, but I need officers I can trust to oversee the operation directly." Lyra's antennae quivered slightly, a sign of emotional processing Kale had come to recognize. "This would require us to leave active ISF service," she noted. "Temporarily, yes," the Admiral agreed. "Consider it a specialized assignment. When the time comes that these children no longer need your direct supervision, you can return to standard duties with my personal recommendation." They requested time to consider the offer, though Kale already knew in his heart what his answer would be. He found Lyra in the observation lounge later, watching as Leary and several other children marveled at the stars from the massive viewports. "You're considering the Admiral's offer," he said, joining her. "It is logical," she replied. "These children require stability from individuals they trust. Our unique combination of skills makes us statistically optimal candidates." Kale smiled. Most people would just say they've grown attached to the kids. Lyra's antennae twitched in what he now recognized as her version of embarrassment. Xylosians traditionally maintain emotional distance in professional assessments. But, yes, I have developed significant concern for their welfare that exceeds standard duty parameters. "Me too," Kale said softly, watching as Seedling tentatively reached out a tendril to touch the viewport glass. "I keep thinking about what happens to them if we say no." "Then we should say yes," Lyra concluded simply. The formal announcement of their decision brought unexpected reactions from the children. Leary chirped excitedly and fluffed his feathers in what Dr. Thorne identified as an avialien expression of joy. The Lamidian twins, Mira and Tala, glowed so brightly they temporarily overloaded the medical bay's light sensors. Even a usually reserved Seedling extended colorful blossoms from its tendril crown, apparently a rare display of happiness for its species. Over the next several months, as the legal and political fallout from the trafficking ring exposure continued, Kale and Lyra worked with Admiral Tlar to establish the Sanctuary Center on a small, temperate moon in a secure system. Designed with input from xenobiologists, child development specialists, and security experts, it provided both a safe haven and rehabilitation facility for the rescued children. The prosecution of those involved in the trafficking network proceeded steadily, though not without challenges. Vantek remained at large, his considerable resources allowing him to evade Alliance justice. But his organization had been crippled, with key lieutenants captured and financial assets frozen. Life at the sanctuary developed its own rhythm. Kale found himself unexpectedly adept at connecting with the traumatized children, his straightforward manner and protective instincts earning their trust. Lyra's methodical approach to establishing routines and learning systems provided the structure they desperately needed after chaos and fear. Dr. Thorne joined them permanently as the sanctuary's chief medical officer, his gentle manner and specialized knowledge proving invaluable. Other experts gradually became part of their extended team, creating a supportive community around the children. As months passed, some of the children were eventually reunited with families or home communities. Each departure was bittersweet, celebration mixed with the sadness of separation. Yet many remained, either orphaned or from worlds too distant or dangerous to return to. The 4 children from the original rescue, Leary, Seedling, and the twins Mira and Tala, showed no interest in leaving, even when potential placements were identified. They had formed an unbreakable bond with each other and with Kale. And Lyra. "They consider us their family now," Dr. Thorne observed one evening as they watched the 4 playing in the sanctuary's biodome garden, "and each other as siblings, despite their different species." The realization had been gradually forming in both Kale and Lyra's minds, but neither had voiced it until one quiet night, 6 months after the sanctuary's establishment. They were reviewing progress reports when Kale finally asked the question, "What if we made it official?" Lyra looked up, antennae alert. "You are suggesting formal adoption." "All 4 of them," Kale confirmed. "Together, with both of us as parents." The complexity was enormous. Interspecies adoption was rare enough, but 4 different species with 2 guardians of different species themselves was unprecedented. The legal, biological, and cultural challenges would be formidable. It would require significant adaptations to standard family structures, Lyra noted, but her tone wasn't dismissive. Housing modifications, specialized education plans, nutritional considerations. "We're already doing all that," Kale pointed out. "True, and there is another consideration." For the first time since he'd known her, Lyra seemed genuinely hesitant. Human-Xylosian partnerships are uncommon but not unprecedented. However, the legal framework for co-parenting would typically require a formal relationship status between us. Kale felt his heart rate increase. Are you saying we need to get married? Or the equivalent legal arrangement, she clarified quickly. For administrative purposes. They both fell silent, the implication hanging between them. Their relationship had evolved significantly over these months, from reluctant partners to trusted allies to something neither had fully defined. There had been moments of connection, quiet understandings, and an increasing comfort in each other's presence. But neither had taken the step to acknowledge what was developing. Would that be so terrible? Kel finally asked softly. Lyra's antennae curved forward slightly. A gesture he'd come to recognize indicated intense focus. From a practical perspective, it would simplify numerous legal and administrative procedures. I wasn't asking from a practical perspective, Lyra. Her large eyes met his. Then from a personal perspective, no, it would not be terrible at all. The process took another 3 months of legal filings, cultural consultations, and administrative hearings. Admiral Tlar used her considerable influence to navigate bureaucratic obstacles, while Dr. Thorne provided expert testimony on the children's well-being and attachment. Finally, on a clear day, with both the system's suns visible in the sky, they gathered in the sanctuary's central garden for 2 ceremonies. The first, a formal bonding between Kale and Lyra that incorporated elements of both human and Xylosian traditions. The second, the official adoption of all 4 children. Leary wore a ceremonial vest adorned with beads that Dr. Thorne had helped him craft in the Avialian style. The twins glowed with a soft, pearlescent light that reflected their calm happiness. Seedling had grown nearly a foot taller over the months, and now sported a crown of vibrant blue and purple flowers for the occasion. As Admiral Tlar, serving as both official witness and celebrant, concluded the ceremonies, she presented them with the formal documentation, not just adoption papers, but also the deed to a new home. A residence specifically designed for their unique family, located near enough to the sanctuary for continued involvement, but separate enough to be truly their own. The alliance owes you both a debt that can never be fully repaid, the Admiral told them privately afterward. But I hope this small gesture helps begin your new life together properly. Their new home, nestled against a hillside overlooking a shimmer ing lake, had been thoughtfully designed to accommodate every family member's needs. Leary had an airy loft with perches and open spaces for flight. The twins had rooms with special light-reactive surfaces that responded to their bioluminescence. Seedling's room featured a partial greenhouse section with carefully selected soil and lighting conditions. Kale and Lyra's shared quarters balanced his need for warmth with her preference for cooler, more humid conditions. The first night in their new home, after the children had finally settled into sleep, Kale and Lyra stood on the terrace, looking up at the stars. Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up when we were inspecting that cargo ship? Kale asked, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. Lyra's antennae swayed gently in the evening breeze. The statistical probability would have been effectively 0, she acknowledged. Yet here we are. Statistical anomalies, he teased. Perhaps, she said thoughtfully, or perhaps evidence that some outcomes are driven by factors beyond. Statistical modeling. Like what? Like finding one's proper place in the universe, she suggested. With one's proper companions. Inside the house, they could hear Seedling shifting in sleep, tendrils rustling softly. From Leary's room came gentle chirping snores. The twins' room glowed with the soft, pulsing light they emitted during deep sleep cycles. Kale drew Lyra closer, their differences in height, temperature, and biology somehow fitting together perfectly. I think you're right. Some things defy probability. Nevertheless, she said with a hint of humor that had become more frequent in her voice, I calculate a 97.3% probability that Leary will be the first awake tomorrow, followed by the twins precisely 18 minutes later, with Seedling requiring at least 1 additional hour of photosynthesis time. Kale laughed softly, and a 100% probability that I wouldn't change any of it. As the moons rose higher, casting silver light across their new home, Lyra's hand found his. Nor would I, Kale. Nor would I. In the years that followed, Their unconventional family would face countless challenges, from helping the children process their trauma to navigating the complexities of multi-species education. From occasional security threats, as Vantek's remaining associates sought revenge, to the everyday difficulties of raising four very different children. But they would face each challenge together, the bonds between them only strengthening with time. And sometimes, on quiet evenings like this one, they would look back at the strange, dangerous path that had brought them together. A routine inspection, a hidden compartment for frightened children, and marvel at how the universe's darkest corners could sometimes lead to its brightest lights.